While gardening, wear gloves. Don't ever leave your shoes outside because something will crawl in it. Try not to kill the spiders inside your apartment because they're big and they'll just make a really big mess. There's the huntsman, which is probably about this size. Beware of that one, but it's a good spider. It eats the other spiders. The one to watch out for is the redback, which is a cousin to the black widow. The Sydney funnel web, that one's really poisonous and can kill you. We'll watch out for snakes too, because those are deadly too. Pretty much everything in Sydney can kill you, so just watch out. The food's really good. One thing I would say to avoid is durian fruit. It's a giant, like, brown, spiky ball. It's really hard. Don't get it or eat it. It's a bad idea. Mangoes are really good. I had this thing called bitter melon. I don't know why do you eat that? I don't know. Watch out for the bean ice cream. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. But Korean ice cream, that's good. And it's really cheap too. In Australia, there's a lot of words that are different. Fair dinkum. I don't really know what it means, but they use it all over the place. I don't really know. I don't know what that means. Dinky die. I don't really know what that is either. The boot and the bonnet. So that's for your car. So your trunk is called the boot. And then the hood is called the bonnet. A countertop is called the bench. Elevators are a lift. Trash is the bin. If you want the trick to speaking with an Aussie accent, all you have to do is add an R to the end of like anything that sounds or ends in an O. So instead of no, it's like no, just like that. Okay. So and you can listen for it. You'll hear the hidden R in there. But it's interesting because every other word like that has an R actually written in it, then they don't pronounce that. So I don't know what's going on there. Okay, Kiwis are fun. So they're from New Zealand, and they have their own little accent. It's lower, less nasally. You just say bro a lot. It's like, bro, I need some water, bro. So that's Kiwi. When you see someone on the street, you just say, hi go mate. It's how are you going, mate. But you just say, hi go mate. Kind of like one little sound there. So that's kind of fun. Hi go mate. Yeah, just kind of get it up in the nose. Fair income, shall we right? No worries. So there's a lot of really cool animals in Australia. Wombats are pretty cool. They're kind of like a cross between a gerbil and a dog. And then there's koalas. They have the Royal Botanical Gardens. There are really big bats. The flying fox, I think, is what they're called. So they're pretty big. They're fruit bats. And they just kind of roost in the trees there. The birds are pretty exotic looking. The cockatoo is, if you're not familiar with it, it's just a white bird and has like the little yellow head thing, but it makes a really annoying sound. And it like serves as an alarm clock sometimes, which was not nice. There are lorikeets, which are like rainbow kind of colored birds, and they're just like flying around. We would feed the birds, the cockatoos, and slowly we like got them more comfortable with us. So first they would just like, we'd put bread out on the window and then they'd come and eat the bread. Soon we started like making them work for it a little bit. So like we made them come in a little bit. After a while, then we like basically trained them, and they'd come on our arms, they'd go on our back, on our head. Although we realized that there was a problem eventually because we went a couple days without feeding them, and every morning the birds would come to our window and start tapping on the window because they wanted to get fed. So that was pretty fun. Of course, there are kangaroos. What we usually did was we went to like, there's a ton of like nature reserves or whatever, and so you can go to those and pet the kangaroos and feed them and stuff. I spent my summers in the suburbs, and it was very hot. 40 degrees Celsius, so it's probably like 110 or something. I think it got down to freezing like once. I don't remember any severe storms or anything like that, so pretty safe and nice weather. There are some fun like Aussie holidays. Australia Day, which is in January. It's summer there, so going to the beach is pretty typical. You go to the beach for Australia Day and have a barbecue, which is nice. They also have Anzac Day. I can't remember if it was like World War II or something. It's a war memorial. One of their traditions is they have Anzac biscuits or cookies. They call cookies biscuits. And they're really, really hard, but they taste pretty good. You have to watch out when you're biting them because you might injure yourself. The culture of the entire country, everyone's really laid back, pretty chill, and very accepting of everyone. So that was really, really a cool thing. So it's really a neat place to go.
Flying into Australia, this place that, you've heard a lot about, people are very interested in, you think of kangaroos and in the outback. English is the first language, but I must say it was the funniest thing because it took me a long time to figure out what they were trying to say. So I was on the train and the conductor comes up and he says, "Give me a ticket, mate." And I'm just like, what? You know, I was trying to figure out what it is. And he started getting upset at me, like, give me a ticket, mate. And then he was saying, give me your ticket, mate. You know, he's like, I just wanted to see my ticket. And I was just like, I don't understand you people. What's going on? Australia is home to the most poisonous, like, snakes and spiders in the world, you know. It's kind of a, not a great honor, but they have that. And so, you know, we were always kind of like freaking out about the different spiders or whatever we might encounter. But there was one, thankfully it wasn't poisonous, but it's got to be the ugliest, most freakiest spider you'll ever encounter in your life. It was called the huntsman. And in my first area in our flat, I mean, I just looked on the wall and there's a spider the size of my hand just kind of crawling along there. And it was interesting because when you approached it, you know, and you wanted to try to do something with it, it would like turn and literally look at you, you know. And then sometimes it would like raise its front legs and like come after you. It was just like, oh! But so it was quite funny. Thankfully they weren't poisonous, but they're just freaky. And so that was a fun experience being introduced to Australia with that and their wildlife. But yeah, I mean, you know, they have a white tail and a redback, you know, what they call them, poisonous little spiders. But one of my favorite was actually while I was serving in the little island of Tasmania, just off the coast of Victoria, down south. And there are Tasmanian devils. I mean, I went down there, and the first thing I noticed is that there was a lot of roadkill on the road, and most of them were wombats. And these wombats are like these cute creatures, but they have these backs that are as hard as steel, you know. And so it's like they literally would ruin cars. I mean, it would kill the poor animal, but they would just like rip a car apart. But sometimes you just see miles of these poor dead animals on the road. It was big wildlife, you know. But also in Tasmania, it was amazing because, you know, we here, you know, you have these exotic birds that we consider exotic, and they're expensive, these cockatoos and these parrots and other things like that. And there they were just running wild in huge flocks, and it was just amazing to me to just see these beautiful, beautiful birds just running around, just flying around, like, you know, in their home state. It was amazing. And then we also went to this little wildlife preserve, and we were able to actually experience a Tasmanian devil, and they were these incredible little creatures. It was so fun because I kind of thought of them as kind of being a cross between a pig and a rat. I know that's kind of strange, but they were just these amazing animals, but they were scavengers, but they had these jaws of steel and these teeth that were rock hard and very sharp, and so they would literally just feed them like bone, you know, and parts of the animal that had bone in it, and they would just crunch right through it. And they had this awful screech that's just you know, and that's actually how they got their names, because when the settlers first came there, they would hear these awful high-pitched screams, and they would shine their light into the forest or whatever, and they see these glowing red eyes of the devils, and so that's why they call them the Tasmanian devils. That's where they got their name from. But just a fascinating creature, but you know, you don't want to get too close to it. But they were just scavengers, and so I think that's where the cartoonish Tasmanian devil kind of got where they picked up his characteristics from. But some of the people that we would go and teach out in Tasmania was out on these dirt roads out through the forest, you know, and we'd have wallabies, these, you know, kind of miniature kangaroos or wallabies, and they would just jump across the road, you know. It's just part of the wildlife, like a deer around here in Utah. And so you'd see kangaroos all the time, and I actually ate kangaroo. It was fascinating because, you know, animals that you'd never see anywhere else in the world, and just beautiful wildlife. I was a picky eater, so going there I was like, oh dear. But they love custard. They love pouring custard on stuff, and one of the desserts we had, one of the first encounters I had with food was this dessert where it was kind of a pudding, and they would put custard on top of it, you know. And at first I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about this, but it was really, really good, and so I got to learn that. But you know, the diet is very similar to what we have here. They love their fresh fruits though, and they have glorious fruit over there. I mean, just beautiful. About anything, you know, passion fruit and anything you can think of, and it was just glorious. So, you know, they love their fruits, and they love their lamb. You know, they got a lot of lamb out there, and other meats, and they also love squash, but they would call it pumpkin. So they have pumpkin soup, and it was beautiful. It was very nice, very tasty. If you're a really picky eater, you know, you're pretty well fine there in Australia. Had a lot of the same stuff. You know, they had many of the same like fast food places that we have here, and sometimes under a different name, but it was still the same place. And So yeah, you were fine. Meat pies were awesome. That was also popular there in Australia, that we don't really have here. You know, these little pies and meat, and so that was fun. One of the things that people like to associate Australia with is the Vegemite and Marmite. This really highly salty, concentrated spread that they would put on toast and stuff, and you know, and sometimes they think we're real really wimpy because we couldn't handle it. You know, and it just tastes terrible. But they're like, oh, the problem with Americans is you guys just put too much of it on there. You know, you just got to do a thin spread. That's what it was. But so that was fun to kind of experience Vegemite and Marmite. And the other thing that we loved is cordial, which was basically just this highly concentrated syrup that you would pour in of different flavors. You know, and you just mix that with water, and it was just kind of a punch. But they loved their cordial. Cordial was fun. And then I loved their cookies and their chocolate that they have, because they had Cadbury. They had a Cadbury factory like there in Australia, and so Cadbury was like the chocolate of choice there, and so very high quality chocolate. It was lovely. And then one of my favorite desserts that they are very famous for is pavlova, and it's this kind of it's a very fluffy kind of an egg mixture. I can't even remember what it was as kind of a base, you know, very light and fluffy, but on top of it they would put all of these fruits. So, you know, the kiwis, the guava, the passion fruit, the, you know, mango especially, you know, the just strawberries, anything, you know, we put on top of it. So that was a favorite dessert of theirs, and that was lovely. They're lovely people, and very diverse people. One thing, especially with Melbourne, but I think kind of all over Australia, it's an incredible melting pot. In fact, I heard, I haven't verified this, but they have like one of the largest populations of Greek, Italian, Jews outside their home countries in the world, one of them. And so it was really unique, because when you go tracting in different places, you know, you'd come across all sorts of nationalities, and you know, it wasn't just native Australian or, you know, or Aboriginal people, but you have a lot of diversity there. A lot of Chinese, a lot of Spanish coming from South America, Italians, a lot of Greeks. And so it was really unique and a really wonderful experience. They're just, in general, I just found them to be a very relaxed people, very laid back. Some were pretty devout religious, you know, especially coming from those different nationalities where, you know, Greek Orthodox or Catholic was a strong tradition in their culture and their family. Some of them were very strong into that, but others, the average Australian, it was just, you know, everything's fine, you know, you know, no worries, mate, you know, fed income, everything's good, and that's kind of the way that they thought of religion too, you know. It's like, yeah, it's okay. But there's some beautiful, lovely people, and I had some amazing experiences. Just like here in America, you know, people are very politically active, and their prime minister, and they're still, I don't know the exact political term, but they're still kind of a part of the UK in a way. You know, the Queen still has kind of a seat in there, but they have their own parliament, they have their own things like that, you know, and you have people who strongly disagree with the way things are moving in the country, and they'll try to vote them out or whatever, but it was very similar in feel to what I experience here personally in the United States. One of the major ones is the Melbourne Cup, and it's the big horse race. Nobody's out on the street, everybody's indoors. It's about as sacred as Christmas, to be honest, but it was a major holiday that day. Everybody had it off, and to be able to watch the Melbourne Cup. And so yeah, it was fun, because there were certain days like that where they had that. The Australia Open is played there in Melbourne, and that was also kind of a holiday, you know, that whole week while that tournament is going on. In tennis, they don't celebrate, you know, Thanksgiving necessarily, but yeah, their major sporting events is what they kind of center a lot of their holidays on, and their sacred days, and they love their sports. They especially love Aussie rules, which is Aussie football. It's kind of similar to rugby, but different. It's kind of their own thing, and everybody's very into their sports. So everybody has their own sporting teams that they just love and root for. And obviously soccer and cricket are very big sports down there, as well as of course Aussie rules and even rugby. But they love their sports and really get behind those teams. There's a lot of beautiful natural wonders there, obviously, incredible places, beautiful mountainous regions, going out back to see wildlife and various things. Going along the coast is you have this thing called the 12 Apostles, these rock formations on the south coast of the state of Victoria there. The island of Tasmania is just extraordinary. There's a lot of beautiful places and hikes and little natural wonders. You got the Sydney Opera House and a lot of really major landmarks there that are associated with Australia. And then, you go further up the coast and you get into the Great Barrier Reef and some beautiful beaches and along the coastline there.
Going back to that first day in Darwin, we were walking through this field. We were just going to cut through it to go to our next appointment. And we were walking in the middle. All of a sudden, my companion just drops to the ground. I'm like, what the heck? And I look up, and there are these birds just hovering over us. There's about 5 or 6 of them. And they just start sort of dive bombing us. And we got our backpacks and we're swinging them over our head and running. We don't even know what's happening. And there are a couple locals that were just sort of laughing at us. And we started talking to them, and they're like, you guys must be not from here. And we're like, yeah, this is our first day here. And he's like, well, those are birds called plovers, and they nest in the fields. And so we were walking right through the middle of their nest, and we had no idea. And if you look up the plover bird on Google, it's Plover. They have these little spikes on their wings. And so they come down and they can sort of spike you in the back of the head or area. And so it was a pretty dangerous situation, but I had no idea. So do your research. Don't let it scare you. Just be educated. Man, you will really have a struggle understanding what some people are saying, because they speak fast, use very different words, but it is a cool experience for sure. I mean, and they love the American accent. They just think we have the coolest accent, and we think they have the coolest accent. It's a really hard accent to pick up. I mean, I came home speaking just like I do now. I had a couple, different words and stuff like that I used. Still do, today from what I learned over there. But I wouldn't, hate to burst your bubble, but I wouldn't expect to come home speaking with an Australian accent. It's just a really hard accent to pick up and to sort of change. I mean, they talk completely different than we do, but it's a really cool experience. They're the coolest, friendliest people in the world. I mean, you probably heard that, which it's true, and they're the funniest people as well. Holy cow! Almost all of them are just super witty, and they're not afraid to say something that might offend you, and they're gonna crack jokes. And I remember laughing a lot over there, and just from everybody that I met, just because they are just comedians. The whole country, I swear, is really funny, really witty, and they're not afraid to say whatever's on their mind. Their portion sizes, holy cow, are very small compared to ours. When I first got to Adelaide, they took us to Subway, and it was our first sort of meal for lunch, and I just ordered a typical sub and a drink. Finish my drink, I go back up to refill my drink, and the lady's like, oh, are you gonna pay for that? And I'm like, oh no, I'm just getting a refill. And she's like, you need to pay for that. I'm like, I remember looking at her and being like, you guys don't do free refills here? She's like, no, that's the case for everywhere. McDonald's, you name it. You have to pay for every single drink, which is probably a good thing. I ended up honestly losing a little bit of weight out there just because I ate less, a lot less. And it took a while to get used to, for sure, but I mean, it was very beneficial. You will notice a huge difference. Their ice cream is 20 times better than ours. Their chocolate, so much better. They have these things, it's almost like hamburger in terms of like it's available everywhere. It's very quick and easy, but they call them like meat pies. And they're really good. I mean, I love them. You'll love them. Everybody loves them. Just delicious. There's a ton of stuff to do. Holy cow, from going to wildlife parks to see the kangaroos, the koala bears, all the crazy animals that they have over there, to in Darwin, YouTube, the jumping crocodile cruise. If you go up there, this is a must see. You're in this boat, they're dangling like little slabs of meat over the side, and we're talking, they're not little crocodiles, like they're like 15 feet long crocodiles just jumping out of the water, almost getting their full body out of the water to pick these pieces of meat up. And no joke, sometimes I could reach out and touch the crocodile. There's lots of beaches. We would go play ultimate frisbee on the beach, or football, or just go walk along the beach, or waterfalls, and really, really cool things to do. If you go to Alice Springs, there's Ayers Rock. Look it up. It's a really cool spot. It's, I think, one of the, really probably one of the coolest places in the world that you can go to. Street fairs type things where they've got food from all over the world, and just go grab some lunch there. Tons and tons and tons of people. And they have these barbecue pits all over the place. Parks, beaches. And you just go, you hit a button, it turns on. And you probably heard a lot about, like, shrimp, sausages, hot dogs. Like that's their thing. And honestly, not one time did I ever have shrimp on the Barbie. So over there. So I don't know where that came from, but we did have a lot. We did barbecue a ton, but we did a lot of touch rugby. Holy cow, that's a fun sport. They play it all over. Rugby's just so popular there. Cricket, Aussie rules football. So we'd do that too. We'd play that. Cricket, not so much. It's just like a very slow, like baseball. So if baseball's already too slow for you, and cricket's going to be tough. But the other sports, Aussie rules and rugby, they're fun. Holy cow, they're a good time, and they're pretty passionate about their sports over there. So in general, I really did feel pretty safe over there. A lot of their crimes are typical robberies and stuff like that, but in general, I felt really, really safe. We did, unfortunately, in my area, have a break-in. I was with my companion. I'm a very deep sleeper, so I slept through the whole thing. But someone did break into our apartment. There's a whole bunch of chaos, but nothing bad happened, thank goodness. But just keep your doors locked. The typical stuff that you do, but in general, I feel like I felt pretty safe and not really ever in any dangerous situations, thank goodness. Adelaide, Darwin, and Alice Springs are three completely different worlds. Adelaide is hot and dry, and it gets a little bit of cold in their winter, so their seasons are flopped. Christmas is the hottest day of the year. July 4th is pretty cold. So it's a little weird to have that hot Christmas, or have the different seasons that are changed. Alice Springs is almost it's same. It's very dry. It's a lot of red rock, red dirt, the red sand all over the place. It is a different world. And then Darwin is extremely tropical. They have two seasons. They have the wet season and the dry season. That's it. The wet season, it will rain every single day. And if you're from Utah or a drier climate, You don't know what rain is until you've been to Darwin, and it is so wet. I can remember my shoes just being wet every day, just because the air is humid. It's so hard to get stuff to dry. I can remember me and my companion were on our bikes, and this was my first day in Darwin. And it rains during the wet season. It rains every day, but we didn't know that. I mean, we both were actually new, and we heard this sound. We're like, "What the heck is that sound?" And we're just sitting on our bikes, and you can hear the rain coming before it even gets to you. I mean, that's how hard it rains. And it started pouring on us. Luckily, there are bus stops all over the place that are covered. And so those will be your go-to spots if you get up in Darwin. You'll cruise your bike or run to the bus stop. Usually it'll rain for 10 or 15 minutes and it goes away. But yeah, it's 3 different worlds. It's really cool. If you go to either of them, you will have a very different experience. And they are both all have their positive aspects about them for sure. Very hot in all 3 places. At least in the summer. Hot and humid up in Darwin, hot and dry the other 2 places. So one of the things I thought that, when I got off the plane, I thought I was going to see kangaroos, in the front yards of people's houses. Really is not the case. I mean, they're pretty much like deer, You'll see them, out in the open fields. If you're way out in the middle of nowhere, you'll see them. Unfortunately, they've gotten hit by cars and stuff like that crossing the road. But the main place you'll see them is in the zoo. So you have the chance to go to like some wildlife parks where they just sort of hop around. They don't keep them in little enclosures, which is really nice. You can go feed them and you can pet them and all that stuff. But yeah, don't expect to see just kangaroos all over the place, because that's really not the case. Do your research on poisonous bugs, just different things in Australia. That's something I did not do. And when I look back on my time there were some experiences, now that I've learned of all the poisonous and dangerous things that Australia has, I am blown away that I did not get, bitten by a snake or, crocodiles or whatever, because there are so many different things, and really I was sort of clueless to that and sort of learned as I went. So I definitely, don't let us scare you, obviously. In Darwin, they have saltwater crocodiles, and they're one of the most aggressive animals in the world. And you'll see all the time on like headlines of the newspaper of like crocodile attacks and stuff like that. And I was just sort of ignorant to it. I can remember we had these little hand fishing reels. It was around like a little spool, and one of them, we just went off the side of this little river that like ran into the beach, and we were right there on the sand just fishing. So many times there have been crocodile attacks or dogs getting, or kangaroos or whatever. And man, I just think about how lucky I was and how it's important to know what your dangers are. Obviously, don't let that deter you or anything like that, but just, educate yourself. They even have poisonous fish. They have obviously a lot of snakes, a lot of spiders. A lot of their shopping centers they have, you imagine, our shopping mall, but having a Walmart attached to it or a Target attached to it. So you go to one place, you can get everything done, which is really nice.
So they have these grubs, they're called witchetty grubs. They have to dig down about 4 feet under a specific type of tree out in the bush. And then they crack open the roots of the tree, and then there's these grubs that are about this long and about this thick around. But they taste basically like scrambled eggs. So that was a really surprising but tasty food that they had there. I had this opportunity to live in an Aboriginal community for 17 months actually, and kind of do what the Aboriginal people did in Central Australia. And we got to actually go hunting with them and live with them and do a lot of the things they did. So I got to try kangaroo. Almost every day we ate kangaroo. And then emu, tons of different types of lizards. They eat grubs, ants, things like that. I ate emu and camel. So all of those things, I actually really enjoyed all of them. They were super good. And they cook them the traditional way on an underground oven, and it was really tasty. So the best way I can describe kangaroo is kind of a greasy mutton flavor. So it's an interesting flavor, it's its own flavor, but it's really greasy depending on the different body parts of the kangaroo that you eat. So their favorite thing, the Aboriginal people in the community that I lived in, they love the tail. So they always get the tails from the grocery store, and then they'll cook them underground, and then you just bite it in the little sections that they cut off. So I was able to actually live with the Aboriginal people and learn a lot about their culture and what they do, even learn some of their language. And for the most part of that, we slept in a tent out in the outback. So it's just kind of give a demographic or range of where this is. I served in Alice Springs, and then outside of Alice Springs are all these bush communities where the Aboriginal people live. So it's kind of like 5 hours from the middle of nowhere in the very middle of Australia. And it's super hot, and if you think of Australia, you've never been there before, it's exactly what it looks like there. Like red dirt everywhere, really flat in a lot of places, and you see a lot of kangaroos and dingoes almost every day. You see them there. But I got to live in a tent and do what they do and basically live like them. It was a really amazing experience that I really enjoyed out there, getting to know those people and seeing a completely different side of Australia than most people know about. I mean, out in the bush communities, there's kind of a joke about all the dogs that live out there. Like a lot of other smaller third world countries, even though Australia is not third world, once you get out into the bush, it's a whole different, almost like a different country, a different place. But there's dogs that run rampant everywhere. I remember one time, they don't eat the dogs there, but I remember one time, one of the ladies in the community, her dog had died. So she asked us if we would go bury it. And then I remember on our way to bury it, I accidentally hit another dog and killed that one as well. So I actually ended up burying 2 dogs that day. But then that night, one of the other dogs gave birth to 7 puppies. So I mean, we didn't lose any. It was still a net positive of puppies in the community. So it was always interesting with the dogs and how many there were, and they just run rampant kind of everywhere. I remember one time I got a package from my family, and they live here in America, and they had sent me some American food. So I had Cheez-Its, so it's just a cheesy cracker kind of thing that they sent to me. And me and my friend were walking down a path outside trying to talk to people. But on the side of the hill up above us, we saw a kangaroo up there. So, and I had these Cheez-Its in my bag, so I wanted to see if I could feed the kangaroo, if it would come down and eat the Cheez-Its. And so I threw some up the hill at it, and amazingly, the kangaroo did come down, but it didn't eat the Cheez-Its. But then all these people came up and asked what we were doing, and we ended up making like 10 different friends because they saw us trying to feed the kangaroos and wondered what we were doing. So it was pretty funny. So in that same area, it doesn't rain very often. Out of the first year that I was there, I probably only saw it rain 3 times. And it's kind of funny because in that same area, they have a river. It's called the Todd River. But it actually only has water in it once every like 5 years. It doesn't flow very often. So they've kind of made a joke out of it in that community in Alice Springs. Every year they have a river race. But everyone makes these fake boats that they stand up in, and then they run in the dry riverbed out in the sand. And actually, as missionaries, we were allowed to compete in it, and we actually took 1st and 2nd place 2 years in a row. So it's pretty impressive. So where I lived in Australia, it's the very middle of Australia, and it's surrounded by 3 really big deserts. And I think the coldest I ever felt was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be like 15 degrees Celsius. And then the hottest that I ever felt was 126 degrees Fahrenheit. So there was like 3 months straight where it was always over 110 degrees. And then even at nighttime, it only cools down to like 90 degrees. So you just get used to like always sweating. But when I came back to America, my family made fun of me because I asked them to turn the aircon off in the car. I got too cold in the car. And that's still something I've tried to adjust back to, is the weather. I think it's too cold over here. I really miss the heat in Australia. And then the other thing I really love just about Australia, about the culture, is how diverse it is. I mean, I met people from tons of different countries that all come to Australia, and they're Australian too. That's what's really cool, is that it's not just one type of person that makes up Australians. They're from all over, and they really love and accept each other as Australians. I flew from Brisbane all the way back to LA, and when I got into LA, I heard people announcing stuff, and I was like, is that how Americans sound? I sound awful. I hope I don't sound like that. But I really miss the accent and the way that people talk over there. They have no meat pies here, which is really disappointing. If you've had KFC in America, it's disgusting. Don't ever do it. But KFC in Australia, it's honestly the best thing ever. We smash the KFC all the time, had some mean-ass feeds over there. And then people would always buy us KFC too, but it's like a different menu. They have like wraps and burgers and different things, and it's like the top end of the restaurant chain over there. You always have to get the KFC in Australia. A funny thing is they call McDonald's, they call it Macca's. So if you're gonna go eat McDonald's and you say you're going for a Macca's run, and then you go get it, and it's good food too. It's not like here where it's cheap American food. As far as classic Australian food goes though, I loved meat pies, loved sausage rolls. A lot of bakery foods that we don't have here in America, I really enjoyed those things. They have pavlova, obviously, is a famous Australian dessert. Lamingtons, which is just like cake covered in chocolate and coconut. It's delicious. And then I also really enjoyed Vegemite rolls. So they look like cinnamon rolls, but it's with Vegemite and cheese, and it's delicious. So Vegemite is kind of like a spread. They put it on toast and a lot of bread and things like that in Australia. But it's made out of like fermented yeast, basically. So it's super salty, but you have to have an acquired taste for it. And some people like it, some don't. So one thing that they have there in Australia, they call it AFL, or the Australian Football League. And it's kind of like their own sport that they play over there. I'd never even heard of it until I've been there. But it's the best way I can describe it is a mix between like football, soccer, and rugby all combined. And then it's a massive thing there. Depending on what city you're from, you have your teams. I would definitely have to go for the Crows, Adelaide Crows. But it's really funny to watch how serious people get about this sport. No matter what city you're from, you have to have a team. And if you're not on that team, or if you don't support that team, then you don't talk to people. So one of the places I lived there in Australia was a city called Adelaide, and they have 2 AFL teams there. And if you're a Port Power fan, then you don't talk to the Crows fans. It's really kind of funny, the rivalry that they have between AFL teams. Over here in America, we say, like, we have this Australian saying where throw another shrimp on the barbie, or something like that. But actually, that's just an American thing. They actually don't say shrimp over there. They call them prawns. So that's another thing. If you ever hear that in America, then you know it's just a fake thing. It's actually prawns on the barbie. So that's just a fun fact. So one of the really cool things about Australia is the Indigenous culture, the Indigenous tribes they have there. So there's actually over 1,000 different dialects or groups of native Indigenous Australians throughout Australia. And then I got to live in the very middle, and just in that central region, there's about 10 different tribes or groups of people out there. So the main tribe that I lived with, their group of people, was the Eastern Aranda people. They have their own dreamtime. So dreamtime for them is kind of like their religion or their beliefs. And they believe in sacred ancestors that created the earth and are present in their culture or the habitat around them. And they're very respectful of the animals and of their history. And it's a really beautiful culture that they have there. One thing that I really love about Australians, first of all, is their love for family. They're super oriented in family, and they always are having family gatherings. There's always an excuse to party, it seems like, which is I think it's a really awesome thing, that there's always so much time to spend together and to do things together. So in the places that I lived, it was really common to meet people from Sudan, South Sudan, Ghana, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then a ton of places in Asia, Malaysia, China, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, and then tons of Pacific Islanders as well. So like Tonga, Samoa, New Zealand, Cook Islands, Tuvalu, Tokelau, places from all over the place that you can imagine. And it was one of the coolest things because I grew up in America in a pretty small farm town where there wasn't much of that. So to go there and to see all those people living in the same place and working together, it was really amazing. As far as differences go, I mean, Because it's kind of a European country, it was colonized by British people, there's a lot of similarities to America in the culture, but a lot of the stores are different, they sell different things, they drive on the left side of the road, their accent's really, really cool. And then also the seasons, like it was really weird going to Australia and it being, when it's Christmas time, I'm used to like 3 feet of snow, and going there, that's the hottest time of the year. And everyone goes to the beach on Christmas Day or on Boxing Day, so that was really interesting to go over there and to be in a completely flip-flopped climate. It depends where you go in Australia, but generally transportation seems to be a lot of buses, a lot of trains, and then people walk a lot too. Pretty similar, but definitely they have a lot more buses than I've seen here in America. Well, a lot of the foods that I like Milo, like even corned beef, those are things that are not very common here, but they're cheap over in Australia, and things like that. I miss those a lot. Tim Tams, a lot of the food. It depends on the place that you're at in Australia, but if you're in the central part, it stays pretty warm throughout the whole year. And then if you're at the top of Australia, that's where it's really tropical. And they actually don't even have 4 seasons. They just have a dry season and a wet season. So during the wet season, it gets like 100% humidity and super, super hot. So it's kind of a crazy transition. But then if you go to the south part of Australia, like Victoria or even in Adelaide, they have cooler weather. And they actually have some places that it snows, but it's really rare to find places that it snows in Australia. When I first arrived, they were super nice to me. They kind of could tell that I was stood out because of my accent, the way that I talked, things like that. But they're willing to help you through those things. They're very loving people in Australia. I absolutely really, really loved Australia. I loved my time there. I love the people that I met. And honestly, the hardest part about living in Australia was the time that I had to leave. I was super sad to leave and to have to go back to my life in America. Not that it's bad here, but I really grew to enjoy the culture, the customs, and the people there especially. I feel like I left my family there. It meant a lot to me to get to know those people.
I remember riding my bike and I was thinking, I wonder if this can get any worse. And the next thing I knew, this foot just flew past my head. And apparently some guy driving past me stuck his foot out the window, his whole leg. And I don't know if he was trying to kick me in the head as he went by or something, but that's what it seemed like. I'm not sure if he thought that through though, because I would probably hurt him pretty bad as well. I don't think I ever went in a house that had a basement in Australia. The houses seem really, really expensive. There'd be a house very average size, but because of the location or because of it being in Sydney, it would be close to $1 million or even over $1 million. The roads in Sydney are really interesting. I felt like I was in traffic a lot. It seems like sometimes that they put the buildings in first and then realized, oh, we got to put roads in. So they just tossed them in on top. And so you've got all these different kinds of roads, and some of them are dead ends, some of them twist in interesting ways that I've never seen before. But it was definitely a learning experience. Not only do you drive on the wrong side of the road, wrong side of the car, but the roads are very narrow and they've got some interesting curves to them. Time for Thai restaurant. Thai food. It was the best restaurant of my life. It's really diverse and the food's the same way. In my first area, obviously I had to learn how to use chopsticks. So that was new. I'd never used them before in my life. My second area, there was a lot of islander food. They like to feed you a lot. So it's easy to gain weight in an area like that. I remember eating jellyfish tentacles once. That was interesting. Kind of like chewing on rubber bands with flavor. That's what it felt like. They had an interesting sort of cake that was called pavlova. I've never seen anything like it before. If you were to make a cake out of cotton candy, in my opinion, it would be kind of like that. And they also have meat pies a lot. They have pies and they put meat inside of them, all different kinds. Really good. And if you ever get the chance to try a Tim Tam, their little chocolate biscuit that they have, those are the best things. So good. It was hard for you to get a response if you'd say, hey, how are you, in American accent, or how are you doing on the street? But if you say, hey, how you going? Or even how you going, mate, right? They would answer usually. One thing I noticed in Sydney was they're very laid back. You know, there's a lot of stressful things that we encounter in life, but one of the things that they would always like to say is, you know, should be all right. Should be okay. And they just keep going and they just be relaxed about it. And they really like that about us, a person as well. If they can go in there and they can talk with them on the street in a relaxed way, like friend to friend. If you go up to them all tense, then they're kind of like, what's your deal? Just calm down. Life is about being calm. So that's something I admired about their culture. They just pretty much expect people to be courteous, generally speaking. I noticed driving in Australia, people were really, really fair on the roads. They want you to wave and say thank you, you know, but they let you in when you need to get in. They let you out when you need to get out. Australia Day, that was a different holiday. Not used to having that. But they're very patriotic on that day. Sydney's a really unique and I think it's a really beautiful city, really nice. Their beaches are something that a lot of people really, really like. You'll see a lot of families that just immediately go straight to the beach right after work or school, and they'll stay there till the end of the day. And the next day they'll go to work and they'll do the same thing the next day. They love it. There's cool buildings, the Opera House. You get to see that on Finding Nemo, and the fish pops up out of the water. That one's a cool one to walk by. Hyde Park in the city is a nice big park that they have there. Sydney's a pretty safe place. They are generally really nice people. I mean, the only person that ever tried to take anything from me, trying to rob me, and I didn't even know it. So I don't think that there's very much of a threat there as far as crime goes. Of course, you have some areas where it's worse, some areas where it's better. There's a lot of trains, a lot of buses, and there's a place called Coffs Harbour. It's very, very, very beautiful. Definitely have a lot of different phrases that they use that are hard to get used to. Instead of saying how you doing a lot, they go down the road and say how you going. Sometimes it throw you off a little bit. You're not sure what they're asking. They say heaps when they want to say a lot. So say I just had heaps of food today, so I'm full. They call the trunk of a car a boot. They call the hood a bonnet. Instead of windshield, it's windscreen. So there's just a few things like that that you have to be aware of. There's some people that live out in the bush that have a little bit of a stronger accent. It's just more of a strong accent, I would say. A lot of the times for mealtime, they call it tea time, which is kind of random. We're not having tea or anything, but it's just kind of what they do. I'm just so grateful for everything that I learned with you, and I'm grateful for the people that you are. I have a lot of faith and a lot of confidence in all of you, and pray that we'll be able to continue to be good friends.